And so that's really the distinction. Will that purchase be able to pay off its own debt? If it can't pay off its own debt, it's probably a bad idea. Unless, of course, if it's a necessary expense like gas or food or travel, wherein you're then going to pay off the credit card debt in full each month, except for maybe $5 or $10 or $50 balance so that you can build up your credit.
Warning, always perform due diligence before making an investment. All advice in this video assumes you properly and thoroughly investigate before making an acquisition.
Hey, Jason Rogers here. Excuse the hat and things of this nature with these barbershops being closed. It's getting pretty tough out here. But nevertheless, I wanted to talk to you in this video about a really important topic, and this is something that can make or break your financial future. The uses of debt. What is a good use of debt? What is a bad use of debt? And I, of course, implore you to think for yourself in this video and to make your own judgments and determinations, but I want to share with you some thoughts that I believe are very important as it relates to the use of debt, the procurement of debt. What types of assets and purchases should you use alongside debt versus what types of purchases would you never want to engage with debt? Okay, so firstly, I would say to you that buying cash flowing assets would be the best use of debt that you could possibly make. Right? So for example, buying cash flowing real estate that you are going to rent out or lease out to generate more cash flow than the debt service, I view that, of course, as a very good use of debt for a host of reasons. One being that real estate generally appreciates. A second being that, of course, it's going to be the cash flow of the real estate that's going to be paying off the debt as opposed to you having to use your other sources of income to pay off the debt. And of course, buying cash flowing assets using debt means that once you pay that debt off, then all of that cash flow will be yours or your investment groups, depending on how you structure your acquisition, right? So I would undoubtedly say that buying real estate with debt is a worthwhile use of that debt. Next, I would equally say that buying businesses using debt makes a lot of sense for the very same reasons I just shared as it relates to real estate. By and large, there's a couple of distinctions, but notably, it's the earnings of the business that you're buying that will pay off the debt that you use to buy the business, right? So it's not you coming out of pocket each month paying off that debt as long as you run the business well. Ostensibly, it's the business itself that's going to pay off the debt, right? So the business covers the debt service, and therefore, that's another useful use of debt, in my opinion. Now, that said, most folks in the United States never use debt to buy either real estate or businesses. Most individuals use debt to buy things like clothes, cars, luxury items, other consumer goods. And I would say to you that that's a terrible use of debt, with a few exceptions. And firstly, the underlying exception would be that using small amounts of, say, credit card debt to build up your credit score has some merit, right? So for example, I usually put groceries on a credit card. I then pay that off each month, except for I leave about a $5 balance. Why do I do that? Well, firstly, depending on the credit card company that you use, you can get some types of points or benefits and things of this nature. I'm sure you've seen the advertisements for, 2-point, cash back, or 2 points for every $100 you buy on groceries, or 3 points per dollar if you buy airline tickets and things of that nature, right? So these different credit card companies often partner with airliners or grocery stores or what have you, gas companies perhaps, and they give you benefits and perks if you use their credit card to buy some of these consumer goods. So I would say there it makes actual sense to use debt in the form of, say, a credit card to buy, say, again, your groceries, your gas, your airline tickets, maybe business expenses, things like that. Right, so there are positive uses, of course, for debt that go beyond, in my opinion, buying 1, real estate, and 2, businesses. But the key point is I wouldn't crank up that interest. I don't recommend you pay 20% interest on groceries. I don't recommend you pay 20% interest on gas. Why would you want to do that? Right? So you pay that off except for maybe $5 or $10 or $50 a month. And that also allows you to build your credit so that if you then want to buy a home, you then want to buy a multifamily real estate property, you then want to buy a business, you've already demonstrated to lenders that you are a creditworthy individual. right? But the thing that gets people in a lot of trouble, in my opinion, is spending a lot of money on fancy clothes, fancy phones, fancy cars, things that depreciate. You know, there's an old quote, never buy things that rust, rot, or depreciate. And that tends to include things like boats and cars, etc. Right? The minute you drive a car or a truck off the lot, it immediately depreciates in value. Immediately. By some 15 or 20%, if not more, depending on the make and the model of the vehicle. Now, of course, there's exceptions to that rule. For example, if you're running a business and the number one asset that business is going to use to generate revenue are, say, a fleet of vehicles, a fleet of trucks, or a fleet of vans, then it makes sense to use debt to buy those vehicles because the vehicles will then be paying off the debt. Does that make sense? See, whereas if you're buying yourself a personal car, say you want to get a new Mustang, or you want to buy a Bentley, or you want to buy this, that, or the other, unless if that Bentley is going to be used in a way that's going to pay off its own debt, then I don't recommend using debt to buy that vehicle. You want to be able to pay that off in cash. Because again, the vehicle is essentially a luxury item. And so that's really the distinction. Will that purchase be able to pay off its own debt? Right? If I want to buy a fancy new pickup truck just because I want to feel cool, I don't think it's wise to buy that truck with debt. Now, that said, here's another nuance. Let's say I'm able to get 2% financing on an amortization schedule that I like. Then would it make sense to use debt? Maybe so, because I could easily argue that that 2% is such a low price to pay that I could use, say, that $30,000 or $40,000 or $50,000 in cash and deploy that into an asset that can make me a greater rate of return than 2%. Right? So there's levels to this. And the more financially literate you become, the more you'll be able to ascertain where really is the right place to use debt. But until you're able to consistently take money and make that money make money for you at double-digit returns per year, my recommendation is don't use debt to buy things that rust, rot, or depreciate. Don't use debt to buy things that aren't going to generate their own income from that purchase, right? Businesses that you buy using debt, assuming that business can pay off the debt, that's great. Real estate that you use debt to purchase, assuming that real estate can pay off its own debt, that's great. A fleet of vehicles for your company, of course, the labor and the services you're providing with that fleet of vehicles, assuming that's going to pay off the debt, then that's great. But buying a vehicle, generally don't use debt, except that once you know that you know how to use cash to get double-digit rates of return per year, you can then justify saying, you know what, as opposed to buying this pickup truck or this vehicle that I want in cash, why don't I finance it at 2% or 3%? Because I know that I can take that cash and put that as a down payment for real estate or for another business acquisition, and that I can get double-digit returns there. So in other words, do I want to pay this vehicle off in cash but not have to pay 2% in interest, or would I rather pay the 2% in interest and use that cash to buy another business that's going to return me 20% a year? And of course, I'd rather pay 2% in interest but then make 20% a year on that same cash, because then that's an 18% more or less return on capital. Whereas otherwise I would have saved 2%. Do I want to save 2% or make 20%? Right, so there are levels to this game, but again, until you really prove, notably to yourself, it's not about you proving anything to me, but until you, I would say, prove to yourself that you are intelligent enough as a business person to be able to get double-digit rates of return on your money, I really don't implore you to buy things that rust, rot, or depreciate with debt. And certainly, I would say that unless if that fancy suit that you're going to buy on debt is going to make you a lot of money, because by you showing up slick, you're going to feel more confident and you're thus certain you're going to be able to make X, Y, or Z more amount of sales per year or per month or what have you, I would recommend you probably don't buy clothes on debt. There's a lot of people that buy designer jeans or Gucci belts and stuff like this on debt, and I think that's crazy. But again, I could play devil's advocate and say, but what if you're in the high-end luxury sector and you wearing a Gucci belt is going to help you make 25% more sales a year, and that could, lead to another 6 figures in bottom line income for you per year? Well, then I would say then definitely finance the Gucci belt, because in a sense, the Gucci belt is going to lead to more income in your back pocket. But of course, that's only if that's a true statement. If I bought a Gucci belt, one, I don't want one, but two, if I bought a Gucci belt, that's not going to have any positive impact whatsoever on my ability to make more money. So me buying a Gucci belt on debt with finance, if you will, would be a terrible decision. But again, if you're in the high-end I'm a cool person sector, then maybe buying that belt with debt makes sense. Again, it's about, will this purchase that I'm using debt be able to pay itself off without me having to inject my own income into that thing? It should be able to pay for itself. If the purchase is able to pay for itself, then I would say it's worthwhile to finance it. And of course, it should be able to pay off itself, not just with principal. It should be able to pay off both the principal and the interest, which is why your interest payment matters, which is why it's important that you build up your credit score. If you have a 750 plus credit score, you're gonna be able to get a much lower interest rate than if you have a 450 credit score, obviously. So that's why, again, we talk about the things like buying $100 worth a month of groceries on credit and paying off 95 of those dollars and leaving a $5 balance so you build up your credit, right? Because then you're able to get that interest rate lower, and then the cost of capital is a lot cheaper. The cost of debt is a lot cheaper. So getting your cost of debt a lot lower is another way to essentially extend the number of things that are worthwhile to be buying using debt, because debt becomes your friend when you have great credit scores and when you otherwise have a great financial track record, and debt is equally your worst enemy if you have a garbage financial track record. So getting a strong financial track record is as important as anything. And it's a chicken or the egg thing. The elephant in the room being that those who have strong financial histories tend to make better decisions with debt, thus their credit score goes higher, right? So it really starts with you making the right decisions. And this video, again, outlines how to do it. So hopefully you put this advice into play. If you like this video, thumbs it up. If you want me to talk about something else, comment below what you want me to talk about in the next video. What have you learned in this video? I want to hear from you, and let's get the best ideas below so that people can go through the comments and really learn a couple of things here. And then if you haven't yet, subscribe to the YouTube channel for more content like that. And let's hope these barbershops open up soon here. My hair's getting pretty crazy. I need some relief.
Hey, it's Jason Rogers. Thank you so much for watching the video. Be sure to subscribe, thumbs up the video, and for more, go to jasonpaulrogers.com.